What's up, survivors? My name is Sunny, and well, today the newest State of Decay patch has hit the beta, and finally the much anticipated feature of weapon swapping is available. We'll take a look at how it functions and all the stuff that comes around it. Is this a good change? We'll cover that in this video. There was also several other changes, and one of them, guys, I have a bit of a bone to pick, and we'll talk about that in this video. Make sure you guys hit that red subscribe button below, as 90% of you watching still have not subscribed to the newest, fastest growing State of Decay channel on all of YouTube. Also hit that notification bell to see when my videos go live. So weapon switching is now available, and it has answered quite a few of my questions that I've been having. When you aim down on the keyboard, you simply press the number 2 and it swaps to a secondary weapon. Nothing really insane here, but there is some good stuff here that I really liked. One, it does not take up a precious inventory slot. Instead, it uses the empty space that has always been there. Your second gun has to be a pistol or can be an offhand shotgun, so this now makes pistols and some shotguns very viable weapons that you want to seek and keep. The swapping weapon itself is very smooth, except I did have one visual bug out there that I missed recording, but otherwise this worked really well, and actually at times it saved me during certain fights, which I think is part of the intention. Now, as I found myself playing a good half a dozen hours last night, I did notice though I couldn't be bothered to store ammo for my off gun because I just needed that space, plus the fact that having this extra sidearm of course is going to increase the weight in your inventory. So there is some trade-offs here and there is some things to think about, but overall my time with weapon swapping last night was awesome. I used it a ton of times because I typically just like to run one mag in my guns as to not take up a ton of space for loot, and having that second weapon saved me. Even when I did have more ammo in my inventory, it was actually faster to pull this out for my survivors who didn't have their gun skill leveled up, especially for them. So this literally has dozens and dozens of positive uses here that really do change the dynamics of the gameplay, which is awesome. They still have some bugs, as I said earlier. There was this visual bug that throws your left arm up in the air and it just looks terrible, but I also saw some people complain that the reticle would disappear when they would switch their weapon, so they're gonna have to hammer these bugs before this reaches live, which I know a ton of you guys are wondering when that's gonna be, and you guys are anticipating all this. Of course, guys, stay tuned because when this patch does hit live, I'll immediately cover it on my channel, but I do want to say there's some bugs that they gotta hammer out, so this will not be hitting live just yet, but of course stay tuned. With that, guys, it wasn't the only change to come out of this patch. There is one change that I gotta say I'm not too happy with, and then there's some other ones that I actually question. The one that I'm not happiest with has to be this one, where blood plague no longer occurs more quickly in plague territory in the lethal zone, and they're citing the reason for this change is because it was leading to some senseless, unavoidable deaths. Now, I have to say, I did lose one survivor in this beta to one of those that I would say are unavoidable deaths, where a bloater spawned on top of my car while in the middle of driving, and I just didn't even get time to swerve. But I have since learned from that mistake, and it was avoidable, and I'm not sure exactly what they mean by unavoidable deaths, but I think this change is for the worst. I really liked the difficulty that getting more blood plague gave. It really made me do things that I normally wasn't doing. It made me drive slower. It made me more cautious at night to avoid that type of death that I had. It forces you really to slow down your game, which I feel is kind of realistic. Everywhere I went, I had to pretty much carry multiple vials of blood plague because of how serious the threat was. I consistently had to run away from like almost all the time, and yes, I barely could do a lot of things due to the difficulty, but I freaking loved it. I did think that there was some balancing issues that I think needed to be addressed, especially when you start a fresh community with these new plague territories, but I would not have fully eliminated this new danger, at least not to this degree. Heck, even in some of these patch notes, they says they fixed one huge issue that I had, that was with zombies spawning indoors at an insane rate, which I personally hated, and I made me run away a ton. That alone was a big balance change that I think would have helped with this new danger. Overall, I literally spent a few dozen hours after I learned my lessons of losing my 2 survivors. I never died again, though I will say I did come close, but nothing that I felt was really unavoidable like they mentioned, and it really did slow down my gameplay a lot. So honestly, I wish maybe they would have just have the plague infection or tried something different than fully eliminating it. I do admit there was some balancing issues, but I just loved it. So either way, I still did get Blood Plague last night. I still had to use some vials, but now it's not as serious of a threat, and it is what it is. It just feels like it's not as much of a threat now, so I don't know. We'll see how this continues to go. I'm going to continue to play the beta and just feel this out and feel like if this was a good change overall. I did only test it for about half a dozen hours, but we'll see either way. With that, there was another huge change that, again, I want to say that I'm not a massive fan of, but I actually do get why they did this one. The outpost that I did a fully dedicated video on, well, they've made them a lot more costly now. Now, in this beta, you can have a food outpost that can wield up to 6 food per day, so they really buffed how these outposts really work, and they've made them really useful. You simply just had to use your resources and your influence, and I admit it was pretty cheap of influence to use to upgrade the outpost, and I think they potentially doubled the amount of resources it takes to upgrade it, but I'm not 100% sure. Keep in mind, the initial cost to grab this outpost to begin with is still very cheap and affordable. It's when you start to upgrade it to the tier 2 and tier 3 is when they up the cost quite a bit. Before, it would cost somewhere between 300 to 500 influence and I think 5 pieces of material. Now the cost has jumped to 2,000 influence and 10 pieces of material. Now, I agree the cost did need to go up, but it feels like they quadrupled the cost instead of maybe doubling it, which is what I think I would have preferred. Also, because I had started a fresh community and Plague Territory was so hard, like I just outlined, I couldn't even upgrade these outposts very well before with the nerfed costs, because the game was just so difficult and it was so hard to get materials or farm influence, especially materials. But I guess now with the Blood Plague nerfed and I can run around and not feel as threatened, I guess this change makes a lot more sense. Therefore, I don't hate it as much, but it feels like it perhaps was a reaction to the Blood Plague nerf. So at the moment, I don't have a ton of resources because I've been dealing with that previous difficulty, and now these outposts cost a crap ton, which is what I guess this beta is for, guys. It's all for testing purposes, and I'm here for that. Either way, guys, there was also some other changes real quick that I want to highlight. Plague Territory is now more transparent on the map, making it easier to see roads and buildings. Plague Fog is now also thinner and should be easier to see through. These, I think, are good changes, and I did notice them through my playthrough, so good stuff there. Weapon swapping, though, for me, guys, is I think the game changer, and I'm loving it personally, and it makes you wonder how this game hasn't had it since it launched. But other changes I'm still trying to adjust to, so we'll see how they go as I continue to progress through the beta, and I'll of course continue to give my feedback on these videos, and I'm going to let you guys know when this patch actually hits live immediately, so make sure you guys are subscribed for that update. With that, guys, let me know down below, what are your thoughts overall on all these changes? Are they for the better or are they for the worst? And are you liking the new weapon swapping? Let me know down below, as I always read all your comments. As always, guys, stay safe, survivors.